What happens when a beloved morning television host decides to challenge one of the world's most controversial royals on live television? You won't believe what unfolded when Prince Harry sat down with Lorraine Kelly, expecting a friendly chat, only to find himself facing the most brutal interrogation of his media career. This wasn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. It was a complete meltdown that had viewers across the nation glued to their screens in absolute shock. The atmosphere in the ITV studios was electric as Harry made his way onto the familiar Lorraine set, his trademark nervous smile already showing signs of strain. What should have been a straightforward promotional appearance for his latest charitable venture was about to become a masterclass in how quickly live television can spiral out of control. Lorraine Kelly, known for her warm Scottish charm and typically gentle approach with guests, had clearly come prepared for battle, and Harry was walking straight into her trap. "Prince Harry, lovely to have you back on the show," Lorraine began, her voice carrying an edge that regular viewers immediately picked up on. The camera caught Harry's subtle shift in his chair, his media-trained instincts already sensing something was off about the host's demeanor. Lorraine continued, "Now, I have to say, there's been quite a lot of chatter about your recent comments regarding the Commonwealth countries and their relationship with the monarchy. Some might say you've been rather selective with your criticism." Harry's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, though the practiced smile remained. "Well, Lorraine, I think it's important to have honest conversations about difficult topics. That's what progress looks like." His voice carried that defensive undertone that had become his signature in recent interviews, the one that put viewers on edge because they knew controversy was brewing. "Honest conversations, yes," Lorraine nodded, leaning forward slightly. "But some people are wondering why these honest conversations seem to only flow in one direction. You've been quite vocal about the institution's failings, but remarkably quiet about your own role in some rather questionable decisions. The Oprah interview, for instance. Some of those claims have been, well, let's call them disputed." The temperature in the studio seemed to drop. Harry's smile faltered before he quickly recovered, but the cameras caught the crack. "I think what Meghan and I shared was our truth, Lorraine, and I stand by every word of it." His voice had taken on that clipped, aristocratic tone he usually tried to suppress, a clear sign his composure was beginning to slip. "Your truth," Lorraine repeated, her Scottish accent sharpening. "That's an interesting phrase, isn't it? Because surely there's just truth, facts. Either something happened or it didn't. Either someone said something or they didn't." She paused, letting the words hang in the air like a challenge. The problem is, when your truth conflicts with everyone else's recollection of events, it starts to look less like honesty and more like what? Harry cut in, his media persona slipping further. The practiced warmth in his eyes had been replaced by something colder, more volatile. "Please, Lorraine, finish that thought. I'm fascinated to hear what you really think." Lorraine didn't flinch. If anything, she seemed energized. More like a very public temper tantrum from someone who didn't get their way. "You left the royal family because you wanted privacy, yet you've done nothing but court publicity ever since. You complained about media intrusion while simultaneously signing multi-million-dollar deals with Netflix and Spotify. You criticized your family for their handling of mental health issues while publicly airing their private conversations on international television." The studio audience was dead silent. Camera operators frantically adjusted their shots to capture every flicker of Harry's expression as Lorraine's words hit their mark. His hands, once relaxed in his lap, clenched into fists. The transformation was remarkable. The carefully constructed image of the reformed royal was cracking before everyone's eyes. "You have absolutely no idea what you're talking about," Harry said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that was more intimidating than shouting. "You sit here in your comfortable studio, passing judgment on decisions you could never understand, on a life you've never lived, on pressures you've never faced." "Oh, but I do understand pressure." "Harry," Lorraine shot back, her own voice rising. "I understand the pressure of being scrutinized by the public. The difference is, I don't blame everyone else when things don't go my way. I don't throw my colleagues under the bus the moment it becomes convenient." The accusation hung in the air. Harry's face had gone pale except for 2 bright spots of color high on his cheekbones, a sure sign that his temper was about to erupt. "Colleagues?" he repeated, his voice dripping with disdain. "Is that what you think my family are? Colleagues? Well, what would you call them?" Lorraine pressed, sensing she had found a nerve. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you treated them exactly like colleagues. Useful when they served your purposes, disposable when they didn't. The Queen, your grandmother, who gave you everything, who stood by you through scandal after scandal. And how did you repay her? By blindsiding her with announcements on Instagram and then publicly questioning her judgment on international television." That was the breaking point. Harry's composure shattered. "Don't you dare!" he snarled, leaning forward with such intensity that security staff shifted nervously at the edges of the set. "Don't you dare use my grandmother to score cheap points for your little morning show. She understood my position better than any of you ever will." "Did she, though?" Lorraine asked, her voice carrying a note of quiet, cutting curiosity. "Because the reports I heard suggested she was deeply hurt by the way you handled your departure. Deeply disappointed in the accusations you made about the family she devoted her entire life to protecting." The camera zoomed in on Harry's face, capturing the exact moment when his media training finally gave way to raw emotion. The carefully rehearsed composure that had shielded him through countless interviews evaporated, leaving behind the unfiltered fury of a man who felt cornered. His lips parted as though he might unleash a torrent of rage, but for a fleeting second he caught himself, swallowing hard as his eyes darted across the studio. Viewers at home would later remark that in that instant, Harry looked less like a polished royal, and more like a man teetering on the edge of a full-blown outburst. The silence that followed Lorraine's question was deafening. Even the audience, which had been gasping and whispering moments earlier, held its collective breath. The crew barely moved, as though any sudden sound might trigger an explosion. "I loved my grandmother more than anything in this world," Harry finally said, his voice cracking slightly, a flash of vulnerability slipping through. But instead of softening the moment, Lorraine seized it. "And yet you hurt her," she countered, her tone calm but piercing. "You say you loved her, but love is shown through actions, Harry, not words. The way you chose to step away, without warning, without respect, left her blindsided. That's not love, that's betrayal." Harry's fists unclenched, his hands now trembling slightly on his knees. He shook his head, muttering something under his breath that the microphones barely caught. "You don't understand. None of you understand." Lorraine leaned in closer, her voice lowering as though she were speaking to him privately, though millions were watching. "Then help us understand. If your intentions were so noble, why does every choice you've made since look like self-interest, dressed up as victimhood, privacy, but documentaries, family loyalty, but tell-all books, a new life of freedom, but constant public complaints about the old one?" Harry's chest rose and fell more quickly now, his breathing audible. He opened his mouth to speak, then shut it again, visibly wrestling with his words. Finally he spat them out. "Because you've all made me the villain. The press, the public, even people like you. No matter what I do, no matter what choices I make, you twist them into something ugly. I tried to protect my wife, my children, myself, and still you call it betrayal." For the first time, Lorraine's expression softened, but only slightly. "Harry, no one denies the pain you and Meghan endured. But pain doesn't excuse hypocrisy, and right now, it looks like you're more interested in winning sympathy than in telling the whole truth." The audience shifted uncomfortably. It was the sort of moment daytime TV almost never delivered, where entertainment blurred into confrontation so raw that it felt almost invasive to witness. Harry looked around, searching for a sympathetic face among the panel or the crew, but found none. Even the other hosts, who usually supported Lorraine's guests, were stone still, unwilling to interrupt what had become a battle between two unflinching wills. His voice rose again, no longer controlled. "You sit there as though you know me, as though you know my life. But you don't. You don't know what it's like to grow up with your every move photographed, every word twisted, every relationship dissected. You don't know what it's like to walk behind your mother's coffin at 12 years old while the world stares. So don't you dare lecture me about pain, Lorraine. Don't you dare!" The words echoed in the studio. A ripple of gasps spread through the audience. Lorraine didn't flinch, though her eyes briefly glistened. The mention of Diana cutting through the combativeness for a moment. But then she composed herself, sitting back slightly, letting the tension build. "You're right," she said quietly. "I don't know what that's like, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But Harry, grief doesn't give you a free pass to lash out at everyone else forever. At some point, you have to ask yourself, are you healing, or are you just weaponizing your pain?" That line landed like a hammer. Harry recoiled as though struck, blinking rapidly, his jaw slack. The audience murmured nervously. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Lorraine pressed on, sensing the momentum shift. "You say you want to move forward, to create a better future for your children. But everything you've done has dragged the past into the present, forcing the world to relive your pain with you, again and again. How does that help anyone? How does that honor Diana's memory, or your grandmother's legacy, or even your own children, who deserve to grow up away from all this?" Harry's face flushed red. He leaned forward, his voice now a low growl. "Don't talk about my children. Don't you dare bring them into this. They are the reason I fight, the reason I left, the reason I won't stop until the truth is told." "Your truth," Lorraine corrected softly, once again returning to the phrase that had become the fault line of their exchange. "Not the truth." The standoff between them was almost unbearable. The other hosts exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to intervene or let the clash play out. Producers in the control room gestured wildly, torn between cutting to a break and letting the drama continue, knowing this was television history unfolding live. Finally, Harry stood up slightly in his chair, leaning over the table that separated him from Lorraine. "You think you're clever, don't you? Sitting there, trying to trap me with your questions, trying to paint me as some spoiled child. But you're no better than the tabloids I've fought against my whole life. You're part of the same machine." Lorraine didn't blink. "Then why are you here, Harry? Why agree to sit in this chair, on this show, in front of this audience, if you truly believe we're all the enemy? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you need the publicity you claim to despise. It looks like you want the attention. You want the cameras. You need us." The words hit him like a slap. For the first time, Harry faltered completely. He sank back into his chair, his eyes darting downward, his breathing ragged. It was a devastating moment of vulnerability, captured in crystal clarity by the cameras. The audience sat in stunned silence. Lorraine waited, letting the silence stretch until it became unbearable. Then, in a tone softer but still unyielding, she delivered the final blow. "Harry, maybe the real ambush isn't this interview. Maybe the real ambush is the one you've set for yourself, running from an institution you hated, only to build another cage of your own making. And the saddest part is, you don't even see it." Harry's eyes flashed with a mix of rage and despair. His lips moved as though he might respond, but no sound came. The studio lights seemed harsher now, the cameras more intrusive, the silence more damning. At last, Lorraine leaned back in her chair, folding her hands neatly in her lap. "We'll take a short break," she said calmly, her eyes never leaving Harry's face. The screen faded to commercials, but the damage had already been done. Social media would soon erupt with clips, memes, and debates, dissecting every word of the exchange. Commentators would call it the most brutal interview of Harry's career. Lorraine would be hailed by some as fearless, condemned by others as cruel. And Harry, well, Harry had become exactly what he feared most. A spectacle, his pain broadcast once again for the world to consume. When the show returned, the panel attempted to steer the conversation toward lighter topics, but the spell had been broken. Harry remained tense, his responses clipped and defensive. The warmth he had once carried into interviews was gone, replaced by a simmering anger that never quite subsided. By the time the segment ended, even polite applause from the audience sounded hollow, perfunctory. Backstage, reports would later reveal, Harry stormed out without the usual pleasantries, ignoring producers and staff. Lorraine, by contrast, remained composed, chatting calmly with her team as though nothing extraordinary had occurred. But everyone in that studio knew they had just witnessed something extraordinary. The fallout was immediate. Newspapers splashed the confrontation across their front pages. Pundits debated whether Lorraine had been brave or brutal, whether Harry had been unfairly attacked or simply exposed. The interview trended worldwide, clips racking up millions of views within hours. For some, it confirmed their belief that Harry was thin-skinned and entitled. For others, it showed a man under impossible pressure finally breaking down in public. Yet, amid all the noise, one truth stood out. The carefully managed image Harry had tried so hard to project had cracked, perhaps beyond repair. And Lorraine Kelly, armed only with her questions and her unflinching resolve, had been the one to shatter it.